You can't sit here. Ethan Cross snapped, his tone slicing through the calm morning on the yacht like a cold wind off the Miami coast. Simone Carter paused at the top of the steps to the first-class deck, her black tee and jeans simple against the gleaming white rails and polished wood, her posture relaxed but eyes steady, scanning the crew with a quiet authority that went unnoticed at first. Around her, the yacht hummed with soft conversation, champagne glasses clinking, the kind of understated luxury meant to impress, but also to intimidate. And yet Simone moved forward without hesitation, her steps deliberate, each one carrying an invisible weight that seemed to pull the eyes of every guest toward her. Ethan, the head of guest services, leaned over the polished deck railing, clipboard in hand, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, and motioned dismissively, clearly expecting compliance, expecting surprise, expecting submission. But Simone's calm demeanor threw him off balance, subtle but unmistakable. A nearby passenger whispered to their companion, phone raised slightly. Is she? While another leaned back in their lounge chair, eyebrows raised, watching the silent exchange unfold. Simone didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She simply met Ethan's gaze with a quiet, unyielding stare that suggested she had anticipated every angle, every assumption, every slight that could be thrown at her. The crew shifted uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves, glancing at the other guests now fully aware that the situation was no ordinary confrontation. Simone's mind, sharp and deliberate, ran through decades of experiences, remembering every time her presence had been questioned, every door subtly closed, every assumption made about her because of the color of her skin or the simplicity of her appearance. And in that memory, a calm resolve crystallized, a silent plan forming that required no noise, no theatrics, only precision. A small tablet glinted in her hand, but it was not the technology that mattered. It was the authority it represented, the access, the verification, the truth ready to unfold. Ethan's voice rose again, slightly more forceful, attempting to regain control, attempting to assert dominance, unaware that his gestures were being quietly documented, quietly witnessed, quietly challenged by someone who had not just survived prejudice, but mastered the art of response without anger, without spectacle, with only presence and intent. Simone inhaled, eyes scanning the horizon briefly, then back to Ethan, her aura calm but charged, like the tension before a lightning strike. And though she said nothing yet, the air thickened around her, guests leaning forward in subtle fascination, phones instinctively pointing, conversations dying down to silence as anticipation settled like a low tide. And in that silence, a single thought echoed in the minds of those watching. This was not a guest issue. This was a power test. And the woman standing quietly on the first-class deck was about to change everything. Simone stepped forward, her hand lightly resting on the railing, as if the polished wood itself could anchor her presence. Ethan Cross, now visibly flustered, glanced at his crew, searching for support, but found hesitation instead. The guests around them shifted uneasily, some whispering, some glancing down at their phones, others simply staring, sensing that what was unfolding was not ordinary. Simone did not speak yet. Her gaze swept the deck with quiet authority, noting every movement, every flicker of doubt, every micro-expression that betrayed the tension among the crew. She recalled the countless moments when her competence had been questioned, when opportunities had been denied not for lack of skill, but because of preconceptions, and the memory strengthened her resolve without a word. Ethan's voice broke the pause, sharper now, attempting to command the situation. You are in the wrong section. Please move immediately. He gestured toward the stairs leading to the lower deck, but Simone remained still, a subtle lift of her chin signaling control. A guest, a middle-aged man in a crisp white linen shirt, raised his hand slightly, camera poised, whispering to his companion, "Is this really happening?" The murmurs began to ripple across the deck as other guests quietly turned their attention, creating a collective gaze that pressed against the crew, the tension amplifying with each silent acknowledgment. Simone's lips curved slightly, not in triumph, but in anticipation, as her mind calculated the next move. Without haste, she drew her tablet from her bag, the screen catching the sunlight, and a soft glow highlighted the precision in her calm movements. Her assistant's message blinked, confirming the operational protocol ready to execute. She did not panic. She did not rush. She did not raise her voice. Ethan, misreading the calm as hesitation, leaned closer, inspecting her credentials, his tone tinged with disbelief. Are you certain this identification is valid? Simone's eyes met his, steady, unwavering, communicating far more than words ever could. The clarity of her ownership, the undeniable truth of her position. Guests sensed the shift, the quiet authority radiating from Simone contrasting sharply with the uncertainty radiating from Ethan and his team. A young couple nearby whispered, phone subtly recording, the woman murmuring, "She does not need to yell. You can feel the power." The wind swept across the deck, ruffling the edges of the yacht's awnings, as if nature itself recognized the quiet storm. Simone adjusted her stance, weight balanced, hands resting lightly, embodying the equilibrium between patience and imminent action. In this suspended moment, the yacht felt smaller, the social hierarchy compressed, and all eyes acknowledged, without a single shout, that a reckoning was near. Ethan swallowed hard, caught between protocol and reality, as Simone's presence filled the space, calm yet unstoppable, leaving a question hanging in the air that every guest sensed. What would come next? The deck remained hushed, tension palpable, anticipation building, the first-class cabin alive with silent attention, poised on the edge of revelation. Simone remained still, letting the hum of the yacht engines mix with the quiet murmur of the guests as tension coiled like an invisible wire across the deck. Ethan Cross stepped closer, clipboard trembling slightly in his hands, as though the calm surrounding Simone had unsettled not just him, but the crew who now exchanged uncertain glances. She slowly raised her hand, a subtle gesture that seemed to slice through the charged air, and tapped her tablet screen once, activating a confirmation that only she knew had been prepared for this precise moment. A soft ping echoed, nearly imperceptible, but the effect was immediate. Crew access restrictions flashed across the monitors in the yacht's control cabin, protocols shifting in real time, systems validating her ownership quietly but indisputably. Guests leaned forward, sensing the unseen forces at work, phones poised, eyes widening as the imbalance of control tipped visibly towards Simone without a single raised voice. Ethan opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, but hesitated, the words caught between disbelief and recognition, while Simone's gaze never wavered, cool, precise, deliberate. She reflected briefly on the years spent building her empire, the meticulous planning, the patience cultivated through countless moments of being underestimated, and every slight and every misjudgment crystallized into a silent power that radiated outward from her presence. From a corner of the deck, a young passenger whispered to their companion, "She is not moving, and they cannot touch her," and the simple observation captured the collective awe spreading quietly among the other guests. Simone did not need to explain, did not need to shout, did not need to justify. The system itself had become her voice, the confirmation protocols and access logs forming a quiet but undeniable chorus of authority. Ethan's smirk faded as he watched the blinking monitors, realizing that every assumption he had made about control and privilege was now being silently dismantled, challenged by someone who had always known her own value and had prepared meticulously to assert it at the precise moment. Simone allowed herself the faintest curve of her lips, almost imperceptible, not in triumph, but in acknowledgment of the precision with which she had orchestrated this quiet reversal. The guests began to murmur softly, a ripple of recognition passing through them as they understood that the balance of power had shifted entirely, and yet nothing had been raised in anger, nothing had been shouted. The transformation was pure, clean, undeniable. The yacht deck, once just a place of luxury and casual social order, had become a stage for a demonstration of calm authority, of patience translated into impact, of dignity asserting itself without need for spectacle. And as Simone looked across the expanse of polished wood and glinting rails, she could feel the weight of silent observation, of anticipation, of collective acknowledgment. And the question that hung in the warm, salty air was clear to all who had witnessed it. What would unfold next? Now that the true control of the vessel had been quietly but unmistakably claimed, the atmosphere on the first-class deck shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, but every guest sensed it. Simone Carter remained poised, her posture straight, hands resting lightly on the railing as she surveyed the crew with calm precision. Ethan Cross, now aware that his previous attempts at control were failing, adjusted his stance, clipboard in hand, scanning the other staff members for support, only to find hesitation mirrored in their expressions. Whispers began to rise from the guests, phones lifted carefully to capture the moment, the sound of subtle clicks and taps punctuating the tension in the air. Simone's gaze did not waver. It swept slowly across the deck, taking in every reaction, every subtle shift of weight, every flicker of uncertainty. Her mind traced back through years of preparation, decades of calculated patience, and every instance where her authority had been questioned or undermined, reinforcing her resolve without any outward display of emotion. She did not speak, she did not demand. She simply exuded an invisible command that seemed to bend the space around her, a quiet insistence that drew all attention. Ethan opened his mouth again, but hesitation froze the words as he realized the guests were no longer merely spectators. They were participants in the unspoken acknowledgment of Simone's control. A young couple seated nearby leaned closer together, their murmured words barely audible over the hum of the yacht. She does not need to raise her voice. You can feel it. The soft summer breeze carried their awe across the deck, mingling with the faint scent of salt water and polished teak. Simone lifted her tablet slowly, just enough to catch the sunlight, signaling to her assistant, and the yacht's internal systems responded instantly. Access privileges reconfigured, notifications sent, confirmations logged. It was precise, methodical, and absolute. Ethan's smirk faltered, his confidence waning as he processed the invisible shift in authority, while Simone's subtle smile indicated nothing but quiet readiness, a calm before the formal assertion of her power. The guests, some leaning on railings, some standing slightly to get a better view, exchanged glances that acknowledged the unfolding reversal of expectations, a silent consensus forming in the way they held their attention. Simone's presence alone now carried the weight of ownership, her quiet determination amplifying with each second as the anticipation in the air thickened. Every subtle gesture, every measured breath, every glance reinforced her control without the need for confrontation. The deck, once a mere stage for luxury and casual social dynamics, had transformed into a space of quiet reckoning, a testament to the meticulous orchestration of patience and precision, and the guests could feel, with an almost tangible tension, that the moment of revelation was approaching, that Simone's authority was about to become undeniable, and all who witnessed it were suspended in the quiet expectation of what would come next. The guests on the first-class deck leaned slightly forward, some adjusting their seating to better see the subtle, yet undeniable authority emanating from Simone Carter. Ethan Cross's eyes darted from her to his crew, searching for reassurance, finding only hesitation, doubt, and a growing awareness that the situation had shifted irrevocably. Simone did not speak. She did not gesture beyond the deliberate tilt of her tablet, but her presence alone had altered the dynamic. Every movement she made communicated control, confidence, and an unspoken expectation that was impossible to ignore. A soft ripple of whispers passed among the guests, their phones now fully raised, capturing not just images but the essence of a moment that seemed suspended in time. Simone's mind moved methodically, recalling the countless instances where her authority had been questioned in subtle and overt ways, and how she had learned to respond with calm precision, letting preparation and patience speak louder than any argument. The yacht systems, responding to her quiet command, verified her credentials, access privileges updated in real time, confirmations pinging across devices and crew terminals. Ethan's jaw tightened as he processed the implications, his prior certainty evaporating under the weight of undeniable evidence. Simone allowed herself the smallest nod, a gesture so slight yet so powerful that it seemed to bend the space around her with invisible gravity. Guests exchanged looks of recognition, their murmurs now carrying tones of admiration, awe, and disbelief, realizing that this was not a confrontation resolved by force, but by mastery of circumstance and foresight. The sun reflected off the polished deck rails, glinting off champagne glasses and creating a lattice of light that seemed to trace the invisible lines of authority stretching from Simone to every corner of the yacht. She took a deliberate step forward, each movement measured, each breath steady, radiating a calm intensity that drew attention without demand, influence without coercion. Ethan's earlier commands seemed hollow now, gestures of control meaningless against a presence that had anticipated every move. From a distant corner, a passenger murmured, barely audible, "She does not need to prove anything. The proof is in the way she stands." The words echoed in the collective perception of the deck, solidifying the unspoken shift in hierarchy. Simone's calm, deliberate gaze swept across the yacht, landing briefly on each guest, each crew member, conveying both acknowledgment and authority, silently instructing that order, respect, and clarity had been restored by design, not by volume. The air was thick with anticipation, a charged quiet that suggested that the next revelation was imminent, that the subtle power she held was about to be asserted in a way that would leave no doubt. And every eye, every hand holding a phone, every ear tuned to the quiet tension understood that the unfolding sequence was not merely a moment of correction, but the precise articulation of long-established authority, poised to transform expectation into undeniable reality. Simone Carter's eyes scanned the deck once more, taking in the subtle shifts in posture, the quiet tension, and the focused attention of every guest. Ethan Cross adjusted his tie nervously, clearly aware that his authority had been undermined without a single raised voice, without a single overt confrontation. Guests leaned slightly forward, phones poised, some exchanging hushed comments, others simply holding their breath, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Simone's hand rested lightly on her tablet, the screen glowing softly, confirming every procedural verification, every operational detail aligning to reinforce her control. She did not speak, yet her presence communicated clarity, patience, and inevitability. Memories flickered through her mind, moments of being underestimated, times when appearances alone dictated assumptions, and the lessons learned from navigating those experiences with composure. Each recollection strengthened her resolve, sharpening the quiet authority she now radiated. Ethan shifted again, glancing at the crew for guidance, only to find hesitation mirrored in their expressions, uncertainty now replacing the earlier confidence. A guest whispered softly to another, "She does not even need to raise her voice. It is all evident." The words seemed to ripple across the deck, quietly reinforcing the shift in perception. Simone tilted her head slightly, a measured motion, watching how the light glinted off polished rails, reflecting the meticulous order she had instilled without fanfare. The crew's murmurs diminished as the weight of understanding settled upon them. Every protocol activated, every verification completed, every access point confirmed Simone's authority. Ethan's gaze flicked to her once more, realizing that compliance was no longer an option, that respect was no longer a request but a recognition of undeniable presence. Guests shifted in their seats, the air vibrating with subtle excitement, anticipation building as they sensed that the next move would formalize the power that had quietly taken hold. Simone's breath remained steady, her posture unwavering, a model of controlled anticipation. Every second of stillness reinforced the dominance of preparation, the quiet assertion of capability, and the invisible orchestration of authority that left no room for doubt. Phones clicked softly, capturing not only images but the essence of a turning point in perception, the shift of power silently acknowledged by all present. Simone's gaze swept once more across the deck, settling momentarily on Ethan, her eyes steady, conveying a silent message that understanding and recognition were expected, that authority had been re-established, and that the subtle yet profound control she now wielded would soon manifest fully, leaving everyone, from crew to guests, suspended in the anticipation of the decisive assertion that was about to define the remainder of the voyage. Simone Carter shifted slightly, her weight evenly distributed as she allowed the tension to settle fully across the deck, every eye following her subtle movements. Ethan Cross straightened, his confidence waning as he realized that every gesture he had attempted to assert authority had been anticipated, countered, and quietly neutralized without a single word from her. The guests, now fully aware of the unusual gravity of the situation, adjusted their posture, some leaning against the railings, others shifting in their chairs, all absorbing the silent command that had claimed the space. Phones were held aloft, capturing not just the physical scene but the unfolding authority, the meticulous orchestration of control that did not need sound to convey its weight. Simone's eyes scanned the crew members, noting every twitch, every hesitant glance, the unspoken acknowledgment that their assumptions had been dismantled in quiet, undeniable clarity. A passenger near the stern whispered to their companion, "She does not need to speak. You can feel it." And the words, soft but precise, echoed in the awareness of everyone present, reinforcing the inevitability of what was unfolding. Simone's hand rested lightly on her tablet, the device a symbol of her preparation, a trigger for verification protocols that had been silently set in motion, confirming access, credentials, and authority without drama, without spectacle, yet with precision that left no room for doubt. Ethan attempted to move forward, to regain control, but each action was measured against the unseen currents of verification that Simone had orchestrated, and every attempt faltered, met with a calm, imperceptible resistance that communicated ownership and control. The gentle lapping of the water against the hull and the distant hum of the yacht's engines blended with the low murmurs of the guests, creating a soundscape that mirrored the delicate balance of observation, anticipation, and realization. Simone allowed herself a slight nod, a motion that seemed almost casual, yet carried the weight of mastery, signaling that she had accounted for every variable, every expectation, every potential challenge. Guests exchanged quiet, knowing glances, some breathing softly, others holding phones at angles to capture the full scope, all collectively sensing that they were witnessing a demonstration of authority and composure that transcended conventional interaction. The polished wood of the deck, the reflective railings, the calm expanse of open water beyond, all elements seemed aligned with her presence, amplifying the perception of her control. Simone's gaze swept the deck again, landing briefly on Ethan, a silent acknowledgment passing between them that the balance had irrevocably shifted, the moment of quiet reckoning complete, yet holding the promise of a revelation that was imminent. And as the sun glinted off the rails, reflecting light across the faces of attentive guests, the anticipation for what would unfold next pulsed quietly through every observing individual, each aware that the next move would confirm and extend the authority that had been so carefully and deliberately established. Simone Carter paused mid-step, her gaze sweeping the first-class deck with unwavering focus, as if measuring the exact moment when every assumption could be challenged and corrected simultaneously. Ethan Cross shifted uneasily behind his clipboard, sensing the collective attention of the guests now fully aware of the unusual weight she carried without sound or ceremony. Phones were held higher, the low hum of recording devices mixing with the soft lapping of water against the yacht's hull, capturing not only the scene but the tension, the subtle choreography of anticipation that Simone controlled with precision. Her hand hovered briefly over the tablet, confirming the final verifications, each ping of approval quiet yet absolute, a signal that all systems acknowledged her authority and the crew's prior presumptions were now obsolete. Guests leaned in, murmurs of quiet admiration passing between them as they realized that the balance of control had shifted entirely, not through argument or confrontation, but through composed, deliberate orchestration. Simone's mind traced back through countless similar situations, moments when her judgment had been questioned or dismissed, memories sharpening her clarity and reinforcing the power in her presence. The crew exchanged hesitant glances, the subtle tremor of uncertainty visible in their posture, the recognition that compliance was now not an option but a necessity. Simone took a measured step forward, each movement deliberate, radiating calm control that seemed to bend the attention of the entire deck toward her. The sunlight reflected off polished rails and the edges of glass panels, scattering light across the deck and glinting off champagne flutes, illuminating the faces of those observing with subtle awe. A passenger murmured softly to another, "She does not need to prove herself. You can feel it." And the words carried weight, reinforcing the silent acknowledgment that her authority was undisputed. Simone's lips curved in the faintest expression of composure, a gesture that suggested awareness and preparedness, not triumph, as the yacht's systems quietly confirmed her credentials, her ownership, and the operational control she had orchestrated with meticulous care. Ethan's voice faltered as he attempted another assertion of protocol, realizing that his commands no longer carried influence, and that every micro-movement he had relied upon to maintain control had been countered by her deliberate calm. The deck, once a neutral space of casual social order, now hummed with anticipation, every subtle glance, every phone raised, every hushed exchange contributing to the understanding that a moment of reckoning was imminent. Simone's eyes scanned the space one final time, noting the reactions of guests and crew alike, absorbing their recognition and expectation, and in that quiet, suspended moment, the future action, deliberate and unavoidable, poised to formalize her authority, waited only for the final signal, leaving everyone on the deck holding their breath for the inevitable conclusion that would soon unfold. Simone Carter lifted her hand slightly, a subtle motion that seemed almost imperceptible, yet every crew member and guest on the deck sensed the significance immediately. Ethan Cross stiffened, glancing from her to the control panel, realizing that the protocols he had relied on were now fully aligned with her authority, validating her position without dispute. The soft hum of the yacht's engines mingled with the faint clinking of glass as champagne glasses were adjusted and phones clicked to capture every nuanced shift, the audience of guests now fully invested in the unfolding quiet drama. Simone's gaze swept the deck, noting the reactions, the tentative whispers, the slight leaning forward, the subtle movements that collectively conveyed the acknowledgment of her presence and control. She recalled the countless moments when assumptions about her competence had been made, each one a lesson in patience, observation, and strategic timing, and now those lessons converged into a calm, deliberate authority that needed no words to enforce itself. The tablet in her hand glowed softly, a silent confirmation of ownership, verification, and complete operational control, and every blink of the screen reinforced the undeniable truth of her position. Ethan's attempts to assert command faltered under the weight of quiet precision, his gestures now redundant, his words unnecessary, as the silent consensus of the guests and crew acknowledged the shift in balance. A middle-aged woman whispered to her partner, "You can feel it. She does not need to raise her voice. It is in the way she holds herself." And the statement resonated across the deck, carried in the subtle nods and widened eyes of those observing. Simone adjusted her stance slightly, each movement measured, radiating a composed intensity that drew attention naturally, effortlessly, making the space itself feel organized and aligned to her will. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces, catching on metal rails and crystal-clear glass, illuminating the faces of the audience with a subtle brilliance, emphasizing the unspoken authority that now dominated the deck. The crew's murmurs subsided entirely, replaced by quiet recognition, understanding that the moment required neither argument nor elevation of voice, only acknowledgment of presence, preparation, and precision. Simone's eyes held Ethan's for a long, measured second, communicating without a single word that the control he had assumed was gone, and that the next steps, when revealed, would leave no room for misinterpretation or hesitation. The guests, sensing the inevitability of the forthcoming assertion of power, leaned forward, anticipation radiating from their subtle movements, the quiet energy thickening as they collectively understood that a decisive demonstration of authority was imminent. Simone's breath remained even, her focus unwavering, her posture firm yet natural, every micro-movement calibrated to reinforce the silent but unmistakable control she now wielded over the space, leaving the yacht's first-class deck suspended in a moment of poised expectation, all eyes fixed, waiting for the revelation that would confirm the shift in power and the unassailable command she held. Simone Carter finally spoke, her voice calm, yet carrying an unmistakable weight that drew every ear on the deck toward her. "You called me a fraud on my own yacht." The words cut through the quiet like sunlight slicing through morning fog, precise, measured, undeniable. Ethan Cross froze mid-step, the clipboard in his hands now seeming inconsequential, as every crew member and guest registered the magnitude of her statement. phones lifted instinctively, capturing not just an image but the unfolding moment of revelation. The tangible shift in authority that required no demonstration beyond presence and clarity. Simone's gaze moved deliberately across the deck, landing briefly on each observer. Each glance a silent assertion of control and precision, the weight of decades of experience radiating from her posture. She recalled every instance where assumptions had been made against her, every subtle dismissal, every prejudice encountered, and now, all of those experiences converged into this singular, calm assertion of truth. The crew, once certain of their position and roles, exchanged tentative glances, hesitation replacing prior confidence. As systems quietly confirmed Simone's credentials and access, the protocols validating her authority in real time without spectacle or shout. Guests murmured softly, leaning in, whispering observations to one another, the realization spreading that the balance of power had been quietly and conclusively claimed. A young couple, seated at the edge of the deck, whispered, "She does not need to shout. You can feel it." And the statement resonated across the attentive audience, emphasizing the unspoken understanding of control. Simone tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture, conveying acknowledgment and readiness, her calm composure reinforcing the authority already recognized by technology, protocol, and human observation alike. Ethan's attempts to regain influence faltered. Each gesture was met by the quiet, precise presence of Simone, a reminder that preparation, patience, and measured action outweighed hastiness or assumption. The sunlight glinted off polished rails and glasses, creating a lattice of light that mirrored the unseen lines of control she had established, reflecting across the attentive faces of guests and crew alike. Every subtle nod, every slight adjustment of stance, every measured breath reinforced the awareness that this was no ordinary confrontation. It was a demonstration of composed mastery, a lesson in authority realized through anticipation and preparation. Simone allowed a small smile, restrained yet meaningful, as the systems confirmed each verification, her presence alone carrying the undeniable assertion of power. The air on the deck was thick with quiet attention, a collective understanding that a moment of formal recognition was imminent, and every observer, from crew to passengers, held their gaze, breaths slightly caught, knowing that the next action would solidify the shift in control and leave no doubt that the yacht's authority had been entirely, methodically, and gracefully reclaimed. The deck seemed to hold its breath as Simone Carter allowed the weight of her presence to settle fully, every observer acutely aware of the shift that had occurred without a single raised voice. Ethan Cross's face showed the faintest tinge of disbelief, his hands gripping the railing as he processed the quiet, yet absolute assertion of authority emanating from her. The guests, leaning forward slightly, adjusted their phones to capture every subtle motion, the soft clicks and taps creating a rhythm that underscored the growing tension and anticipation. Simone's gaze moved deliberately across the deck, noting the expressions of the crew, the slight nods, the hesitant stances, all confirming that her influence had been recognized, not challenged, by those who had assumed control moments before. Each soft ripple of whispered observations among the guests seemed to amplify the quiet power she projected, a collective acknowledgment forming without the need for words. Simone recalled the years of preparation, of careful attention to detail, of mastering patience and strategy in environments that had repeatedly underestimated her, and that knowledge now radiated in every movement, every measured breath, every deliberate step. The yacht's operational systems continued to validate her credentials and authority in real time, a quiet, methodical reinforcement of the control she had quietly claimed. Ethan's previous attempts at asserting protocol seemed hollow against the structured, calm precision with which she operated. A passenger near the bow whispered softly to another, "She is in command," without saying a word, and the subtle recognition spread, a quiet confirmation among the observing crowd that the moment had shifted irreversibly. Simone's hand rested lightly on her tablet, the glow illuminating the edge of her fingers, a soft indicator of readiness and verification, the unseen orchestration of her authority now fully visible in its effect. The polished wood of the deck, the reflective surfaces, and the soft shimmer of sunlight on glass and metal combined to frame the scene, amplifying the quiet control that Simone now wielded. Each guest seemed acutely attuned to the change, shifting in their seats, leaning forward, their breaths held, the sense of anticipation growing as the subtle power she had orchestrated moved toward its inevitable assertion. Ethan's posture slackened slightly, the confidence he had relied on replaced by hesitation, uncertainty, and the dawning awareness that his previous assumptions about control were no longer valid. Simone's eyes swept across the deck one final time, taking in the attention, the subtle alignment of observers, the soft hum of anticipation, and the unspoken acknowledgment that the next step, when taken, would leave no doubt about her authority and the deliberate, quiet mastery with which she had claimed it. The yacht itself now a stage for the culmination of her careful orchestration and poised determination. Simone Carter stood at the center of the first-class deck, her presence a silent command that had reshaped the attention of every guest and crew member alike. Ethan Cross stepped back slightly, his clipboard now irrelevant, as the realization sank in that the protocols he had counted on were under her control, validated by systems and preparation that moved unseen but with precise effect. The guests leaned forward, subtle murmurs rising as phones recorded, capturing the quiet demonstration of authority that required no raised voice, only meticulous execution and an unshakable composure. Simone's eyes swept across the deck, noting the hesitant postures, the soft acknowledgement, the slight shifts in stance that signaled the crew's recognition of her control, a network of silent acceptance forming in real time. Each memory of past misjudgments, subtle dismissals, and underestimated competence strengthened the calm authority she projected, transforming every prior slight into a foundation for the present assertion of power. The tablet in her hand glowed softly, confirmations of access and ownership displayed in real time, reinforcing the reality of her position without spectacle or confrontation. Guests whispered to one another, voices hushed. She does not need to speak. It is clear in the way she carries herself. And the statement, simple yet resonant, spread among those observing, creating a shared recognition of undeniable authority. Simone shifted her weight slightly, the faintest gesture, each movement deliberate, drawing attention naturally, effortlessly, every nuance reinforcing the perception of control. Sunlight glinted off polished rails and glass surfaces, reflecting across the deck in a lattice of light that seemed to highlight the orchestrated mastery of space, timing, and presence. Ethan's attempts at regaining command faltered, gestures and words diminished by the quiet precision with which Simone held the attention and understanding of the space. The hum of the yacht's engines, the soft movement of water against the hull, and the low clicks of cameras and phones created an undercurrent of anticipation, the guests acutely aware that a decisive moment was approaching. Simone's gaze landed briefly on Ethan, steady and calm, communicating without words that the control he had assumed was gone and that acknowledgment, recognition, and compliance were now inevitable. Every guest seemed attuned to the tension, the subtle shift in power, the expectation building quietly, a collective sense that the next step would formalize the authority that had been silently established. Simone's breath remained even, her posture unwavering, each micro-movement reinforcing the quiet dominance she wielded, the deck alive with suspended attention, the atmosphere charged with anticipation, and every observer understanding that the resolution, when enacted, would leave no doubt about the order, control, and unassailable command she now fully embodied. Simone Carter took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the quiet authority she had cultivated resonate across the first-class deck, each guest and crew member now acutely aware of the undeniable shift in power. Ethan Cross stood frozen, clipboard lowered, his prior confidence eroded by the calm precision with which Simone commanded the space without a word, every micro-movement, every measured breath conveying control. Phones hovered, capturing not just the visual scene but the unfolding narrative of composure and strategic mastery that unfolded in real time, the soft hum of engines blending with murmurs of anticipation. Simone's eyes scanned the deck, noting the subtle nods, the hesitations, the slight adjustments in posture that silently acknowledged her presence and authority. Each recollection of previous challenges, of underestimated capabilities and dismissed expertise, had sharpened her focus, strengthening the calm assertion of power that now dominated the environment. The tablet in her hand glowed softly. Each ping and verification a quiet reinforcement of ownership, control, and legitimacy, silently validating every assumption and expectation that had been contested moments before. Guests whispered among themselves, their voices low but clear enough to be heard in the attentive hush. She does not need to speak. The authority is evident, and the statement spread subtly across the deck, reinforcing collective recognition of her control. Simone adjusted her stance, deliberate and composed, radiating an intensity that drew attention naturally, without force, without spectacle, a pure demonstration of calculated authority. Sunlight reflected off polished rails and glass surfaces, glinting on the faces of the audience, emphasizing the orchestrated presence she maintained and the precise command over the environment she had cultivated. Ethan's gestures, once symbols of control, now appeared inconsequential, overridden by her measured movements, her poised focus, and the systems she had quietly activated. The ambient sound of water lapping against the hull, the faint creak of deck boards, the clicks of phones capturing the moment, all seemed in harmony with the silent assertion of her mastery. Simone's gaze met Ethan's briefly, unwavering, communicating the quiet inevitability of acknowledgment and respect, signaling that the control he had assumed was no longer within his grasp. The guests leaned forward slightly, their anticipation almost palpable, a collective understanding forming that the decisive assertion of authority was imminent. Every small movement, every subtle expression, every precise gesture contributed to the growing recognition that the yacht was now under the calm, methodical influence of Simone Carter. The space, once ordinary and structured only by conventional social hierarchy, had transformed into a stage for poised dominance, each observer acutely aware of the measured orchestration of power, the preparation and patience that had culminated in this moment. And as Simone let her eyes sweep across the deck one final time, the collective hush of expectation hung thick in the warm, salty air, a suspended pause before the full confirmation of her authority would be revealed, leaving no doubt in the minds of all who watched that the quiet, deliberate command she had maintained was complete, unassailable, and fully recognized.